It was a cold evening. I had my two nieces with me. One was 6 and the other 8. I had gone to our family cabin, waiting on my sister to return from town. The evening started around 7 p.m., and we didn't have a key to the house, so we waited for a couple hours and the girls eventually fell asleep in my truck. As the night grew later, the temperature also dropped. I fell asleep as well but woke up around 9:30 p.m. It was very cold in the truck, so I started the vehicle. As I depressed the brake pedal to start the truck, I noticed in the side mirror a face looking at me from the glow in the taillight. I hesitated at first, but gathered enough courage to look. I saw a white face with long gray-whitish hair and black eyes looking at me. I freaked out, started the truck and sped off, heading to the highway, not sure if what I saw was following us. It was, though. I felt it jump into the bed of my truck. I turned west to head towards the nearest town, and I went as fast as I could to my parents' house. Upon reaching the turnoff, I noticed it jump out of the truck and run along the right-of-way fence. As I pulled up to the house, I quickly carried my nieces inside. Once there, I situated them for bed. Later that night, I dreamed that I walked about 2 miles to my aunt's house and no one was home. As I walked back, I noticed this thing was following me. I quickly ran home, went inside, and locked the door behind me and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning, I noticed sand and dirt at the foot of my bed. I told my parents of what had happened and what I dreamed about. They took me to a medicine man, and he told me that I had actually been sleepwalking and had walked to my aunt's house. And when I entered her home, this thing followed me in. I'll try to be as accurate as possible. This happened 12 years ago, so some details are blurred. My girlfriend at the time lived in a small ranch-style house on the tip of a long acreage plot. I would often take my shotgun and fishing pole to the large pond on the back of the property. It was close to the fence marking the property line. I'm sitting next to the pond, just casting and reeling for some carp, when I get this strange wave of fear. It was an instantaneous, oh fuck feeling that I've only ever experienced once before when I saw that I was about to wreck my car. Well, I reeled up my line and attached the lure to the catch on the bottom when I heard leaves rustling down by the bank to my right. I leaned out past the tree I was next to and could clearly see leaves being kicked up by something, but there was nothing there. I could see the leaves moving, but I could not see anything else. For a couple moments, I thought it was just a rodent under all the dead leaves. I let out a sigh of relief and whatever was moving froze. At this point, the adrenaline was making me a little shaky, but I wanted to walk over and see what was moving around in the leaves. When I picked up my shotgun, I chambered a shell just in case it was a snake or something. There are a lot of copperheads on our property. As soon as the shell clicked into place, this thing took a step behind the tree it was closest to. Almost see an outline of this thing, like when you record over an old VHS and you can still see the previous movie just a little bit. The outline was humanoid. It leaned out from behind the tree and stared at me. Me, being a moron, said, "I see you watching me." This thing gets startled and ducks back behind the tree. This is when I realized It was intelligent in some way at least, and I started to go into full panic mode. I fired a shell at the tree and took off running back to the house. It's about 3/4 of a mile back and my ears were ringing like crazy from the shot. I slowed down to a trot to catch my breath and compose myself and try to think of an excuse to explain why I fired a round at it. That's when I heard it. This thing was running at me, and its footfall was incredibly heavy. It honestly sounded like a football player, with that plastic on plastic sound the pads make. I racked another round and fire where I think I heard it. At this point it seemed completely invisible. I take off towards the house again, and my girlfriend and her younger brother are just inside the entrance to the pasture I was in. They are probably about 200 yards off when she screams and points to my left, and her brother run back to the house. I finally clear the gate and slam it behind me before the final sprint to the house. When I got inside, she told me she could see dirt and leaves being absolutely torn up behind me but couldn't see anything. Her brother confirmed this, and I felt nauseated from the fact that they saw something too. It still makes me a little shaky to think about it. The next morning, we all went out together in the field. I wanted to find its tracks, and I swear to God it looked like it had covered them up. We only ever found a few indentations around the tree I spotted it at, but even those had been scuffed and covered in leaves and pine needles. My dad used to get up around 3 a.m. every morning for work. Starting at a very early age, I would wake up on my own and wander downstairs to see him before he left. One morning, when I was about 4 years old, I made it to the bottom of the stairs and noticed that the front door was ajar. I opened it up and saw my father in his favorite work shirt making his way down the driveway to his truck in his typical work outfit, a plaid shirt and dickies. I swung the door open wide and yelled for him to come back for a hug before he left. He slowly turned around and just stared at me, then finally started walking back towards the house. He was acting so strangely towards me, and it started to scare me, and I began crying and asking what was wrong. Just as he had almost reached me, a pair of arms encircled me from behind in a great bear hug. I turned my head to see my understandably freaked out father staring at his doppelganger in the same outfit. The double took one look at my dad and started running down the driveway. Meanwhile, my dad yanked me in the house and locked the door. It was the weirdest morning ever. I never did quite figure out what happened. I would not trust my 4-year-old memory of the event if it wasn't also witnessed by my father. He won't really talk about it these days, but my mom has since told me that he called off work, and she spent the day reassuring him that he wasn't crazy. My freshman year of high school, I was going through a negative phase. My mom would describe me as constantly yelling at her and fighting my younger brothers all the time. She said she would pray every day hoping I would change. She told me she was scared that one day I'll get massively out of control and that she'll have to call the police on me. This story happened around summer of 2011. I had just ended my freshman year of high school. It was around 1:30 in the morning. I used to sleep with the door open back then. I randomly woke up and looked at the clock. A few minutes later, I heard faint footsteps. At first, I was thinking this was just in my head. After a few minutes, I started to look around, as I usually do whenever I wake up. I heard the footsteps again. but this time they sounded like they were literally outside my room. In my peripheral vision, I noticed that I couldn't see into my brother's room. He also used to sleep with the door open, and his room is right across from mine. It was as if something was standing in front of or blocking the entryway. I got curious and turned to see what was blocking it, and I saw a humanoid figure about 7 feet tall. It was faceless, bald, and had a fair skin complexion. It was dressed in an old-fashioned attire. It had a cream-colored sweater with what appeared to be random paint strokes and splashes of many colors on it. It also had black pants. It was just standing there, as if it was looking at me. I started analyzing it. It was abnormally thin and had freakishly long arms. They were way past the knee. It also had visible veins running all over its faceless expression. I thought I was dreaming at first. I started blinking, shaking my head and slapping myself in hopes that I was dreaming or hallucinating. I stopped and looked across the hall. It was still standing there. I immediately freaked out when I found out I was not dreaming and pulled the covers over my face. I tried yelling for help, but I couldn't scream from all the terror. 30 minutes or so later, I built up enough courage and pulled the covers off to confront it, but by this time, it was gone. I told my mom about it the next day. She said that ever since I saw that thing, I started to change. I haven't seen it ever since. My youngest brother also happened to see the thing earlier this year. I don't know what this thing could have possibly been, and I know it wasn't sleep paralysis because I was able to move around. Alright, so it was 1996. I was in high school at the time, and I used to be into gangbanging, me and my cousin. So one day, we're just hanging out at this spot with the gang or whatever. We used to go at it a lot with this Asian gang. Well, one of them came up and he's mouthing off something and shows us his gun. My cousin carries guns too and all that, and he was always crazy about saying, "If you're gonna show me your gun, you better use it." He didn't play like that. So we go after this guy. He turns down this alleyway and so did we. My cousin pulls his gun out, and it's starting to get really real out here. He shoots it and hits this kid. So we went up to the body, the reason being my cousin wanted to take his gun. So we go up to the body, and the Asian kid, in front of our eyes, starts changing. His skin starts turning green and rough, like alligator type skin. It scared us to death, man. My cousin asked if the thing was dead. I mean, well, as far as we knew, it was dead. He looked at me, and I looked at him, and we booked it right the hell out of there. To this day, only me and him know what happened. My cousin asked me if I noticed his eyes and asked if they were snake-like or anything. I had seen them. They were more like a fly's eyes, like a bug's. The eyes had like a strange color. I still can't believe it. We were throwing up after it all happened. We were so freaked out. My cousin ended up being killed a few years later. That's what made me do some changes in my life and start doing the right thing. Whenever he was killed, reality really hit me.